just a boy from Kansas out to save the world from chronic disease. And I truly mean that. Nobody is in control of your health but you. I can't heal you. Your doctor can't heal you. You have to heal you. And it's all about having the education and empowerment to know what you need to be changing within yourself, within your life, to set your soul free and accomplish that best life that we all like to talk about. And I truly believe that the greatest medicine of all is to teach people how not to need it. I'm Brendan Vermeyer, the original Holistic Savage. Welcome to the Holistic Savage podcast.
Hey.
What's up, man?
How are you, dude?
Good, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm excited.
I am too. I mean, man, we're just gonna riff. First off, super excited to have you on. Super excited.
I'm excited. I've been waiting for this day for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. It was so cool because it was like when I came on your podcast, I really didn't know what to expect. I'd seen some of your stuff, and then ever since I've been following you avidly because it's like everything I see you posting is just the perfect fusion of like spirituality, functional medicine fused together, thought-provoking, kind of soul awakening. I'm just like, this is a cool guy.
Likewise.
Yeah, so this will be good. So Holistic Savage podcast, I really, as I think you can appreciate and relate to, I really started podcasting primarily to give myself an excuse to have cool conversations with cool people. And then it's like, oh, well, obviously, hopefully people learn a thing or two. So the pillars, the subjects of my brand, my podcast it's all about functional medicine, functional fitness, functional spirituality, and functional psychology. Which, obviously like functional medicine, functional fitness are very established paradigms, but I've never heard anybody say functional spirituality or functional psychology. And it's like, well, I feel like we kind of need all the above, to fully manifest our best life.
Yeah, I think there are some sort of definitions of what spirituality and wisdom are that pretty much put it at the center of what health and well-being is. And look at the functional medicine matrix. Spirituality is in the center of the matrix. Unfortunately, it's just quite a small center. Mm-hmm. And we almost need to, I think, flip it. Yeah. It is the center, but it should be the biggest part of the matrix if we're using that within our kind of consultations and within our clinical reasoning. Spirituality, wisdom are some of the most common issues I see in my chronically unwell clients. And I'm only just starting to really realize how prominent that is.
You couldn't be more spot on. And I think, it is nice where, as I've been traveling and I've gotten to, meet and engage with and discuss and lecture in front of all these different types of, alternative functional integrative practitioners. And it's been cool. Some conferences that I go to are pretty much all naturopathic. Some of them very, very much more kind of medical and more kind of conventional medical. And I don't say that with, it's just they have a different style and they're,
right.
Honestly, they're not as energetically open. They're not as energetically receptive. Naturopaths tend to be a little bit more, crunchy, if you will. And, but you're exactly right, where to me, the deeper I get into all this, I used to kind of, my spirituality and my spiritual practice was more of like a personal thing. It was more of that's what I do on my own time to pursue my most authentic self and in the process of becoming the most authentic version or the best version of my most authentic self. But then, as I've been, building and expanding my functional medicine practice and holistic health practice, I'm like, I can't separate them anymore. I can't, I can't be doing this on the side and all the valuable lessons that I've kind of learned on my own, or am, starting to, tug that string a little bit more. And then meanwhile, yeah, I'm working with all of these individuals that are, struggling with their health, mind, body, and soul. And so it's like, well, that is the biggest piece that I see is these people, generally, they need a lot of help and work with navigating the psycho-emotional, the spiritual. And that's obviously where there's a lot of people doing cool work, like, Joe Dispenza. Like, I've been kind of on to that frequency lately where, but that's where the money is. Like, it all starts here, we love talking about HPA axis and whatever it is that we want to talk about, but it all starts here. And then our metabolic health is just kind of this downstream reflection, until you get bit by that tick and Borrelia is swimming around. But you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah. I think, whatever like 30,000 foot term you want to use, resilience, allostatic load, they all come back to, or at least they partly come back to our perception. And that's going to come back to elements of spirituality and our understanding of ourselves. I'm a huge fan of the concept of resilience. It's one of those things I'm always going to bring up in consults, because from a broad perspective, that's what we're always trying to do with our clients. We're trying to build back some resilience. But what I really like about it, and it was from a book, I think the author is Pemberton, but she talks about resilience not just being this idea of bouncing back from adverse events, but resilience being just as much cognitive, just as much emotional and spiritual as well. So how well can you navigate through stressful experiences? And can you stay aligned to your values? Can you maintain those barriers that we all need to maintain our health and well-being? It's not just about, can you bounce back or, grind your teeth through it, but actually, can you successfully navigate through it? And I thought that was a really nice shift in how we think about resiliency. Because I think sometimes we view it as just keeping our head down and plowing through. But that's not necessarily what resilience is. And it ties in so much with spirituality and wisdom. A great definition, I found a couple of definitions of these that I wrote about recently, but a nice one from a spirituality perspective is a personal search for meaning and purpose in life. Pretty simple, but pretty powerful. And then they said entails connection to self-chosen beliefs, values, and practices that give meaning to life. So there's a strong element of self-awareness that we need. We need time to reflect, to contemplate. And in fact, there was a study that was done, I think a few years ago now, but they kind of investigated what were the requirements required for a group of people to successfully change behavior. And smoking was one of them, like quitting smoking. And interestingly, stability in life was like a really key variable that was required. That's interesting because when a client is coming to us, are they in a stable point in life? Like, that should be a question we're asking, because if not, maybe it's not the right time to go down this path. But another one was time to do some introspection, to actually figure out their values. That was essential for them to have long-term successful behavioral change. And when you start looking at all these things, they are just so interconnected, like you say, that you've got to start there. There's got to be a degree of self-awareness. Self-awareness is an element of self-compassion and mindfulness. So all of these terms that we start to see quite a lot when we enter that space, they overlap completely. So in fact, a definition of wisdom includes spirituality. So wisdom and spirituality suddenly are completely and utterly merged together. Components of wisdom are general knowledge of life, emotion regulation, pro-social behaviors like compassion, self-reflection, acceptance of different value systems, and decisiveness. And that last one really got me. So like, I'm not wise at all, because
Mm-hmm.
I am not a decisive person.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're just really interesting. And when I went through that, and when I was kind of just doing some brainstorming around these topics, it really stood out to me how much they are lacking in the chronically unwell.
Mm-hmm.
And for obvious reasons, there's a definite like chicken and egg argument in regards to, well, what's come first here. But I think if we are trying to recover from a chronic illness, there is always the psychological, emotional, spiritual side to it, even if those things have been eroded by the constant struggle of having that physical symptom, condition, diagnosis. And I honestly believe that the first layer should be getting more well acquainted with some of those concepts, and then building the physical layers on the foundation of a solid spiritual, emotional, psychological framework.
Exactly. And it's interesting how, certainly it's like I started my career like 10 years ago as a trainer and nutritionist, and so it's like constantly trying to redesign the client experience, right? Because over the past couple of years, I kind of started finding, I've gotten a little bit different with how I communicate in like a consultation of like, all right, if we're going to be taking this journey together, which is what this is, this isn't like, oh yeah, run a few tests, give you a piece of paper that tells you like take this much of this, or stop eating this or whatever, and see you in 3 months and you'll be magically better. Like that's not how like functional medicine is very easy paradigm to sell, because our society loves instant gratification. Obviously it's a huge addiction, and certainly the behaviors, the social kind of sociological behavior patterns and trends are completely screwing up our wiring and our perception and cognition. But that's exactly it. We've got to be able to communicate openly and clearly, and that also means if we're going to do that in a professional setting, we can't just be like, well, I'm really woke and I'm about to drop some truth bombs that are going to destroy and obliterate your perception of reality. And it's like, well, no, because that's not being an effective coach. That's not being, a responsible professional. It's kind of this more, okay, well, we have to be able to create a safe space where we can start moving through energy, peeling back layers, digging around a little bit, like, ooh, that's sensitive. So let's, let's work around that. Let's, kind of start tugging on that a little bit. And people just, they're not prepared for that. And that is something in the functional medicine world where, the whole paradigm of functional medicine is this root cause, but we're not talking enough about the psycho-emotional root causes. And that's where I just had my friend Dr. Nicole on the podcast, and holistic psychologist. She's huge on kind of get like going all the way back and like let's reframe and challenge our belief system. And but there's so many different dynamics that we have to tackle. And if functional medicine is going to be what we all want it to be, which is kind of this ultimate modality of root cause, helping people heal themselves, and not just temporarily but permanently, we've got to be able to establish almost like a model of how we go back and start from ground zero with the psycho-emotion. You mentioned a lot of really cool things, but I was thinking like, psyche means soul, right? Like, and if we're trying to heal the meat suit and we're not doing anything to kind of heal the fragments of these broken spirits and kind of broken psyches and whatnot, then how are we ever going to get like true healing going on?
Yeah, I think the functional medicine model is an interesting one. It almost needs, as you say, a complete overhaul to some degree. Like parts of it I absolutely love, and I think functional medicine from my perspective, has evolved a lot already over the last kind of decade. It was very much functional testing, supplements, and then almost like a generic diet, whether that was paleo or whatever. And I think there has been an evolution where this part of it is very much coming into it, but it's a challenge because, as you say, you've got to meet the client where they're at. And I think sometimes when we are suffering, the last thing we want to do is go to the hardest parts of ourselves that we need to go to. There's a great question in the book, Fierce Conversations, by Susan Scott. And she asks, what are you pretending not to know? And I just love that. I think you get to a point in your journey where you can look back and be like, okay, I knew that for like 10 years, but I didn't act on it until now. We're all there with something right now. And it's such a powerful question and even thing to reflect on. And there are some great case studies in the book around, things from marriages that we're kind of pretending not to know about, etc., or within our own marriage. But I think it's that concept that there has to be time. There has to be time in our day, in our week, in our month for some introspection. We have to essentially assess where we're at, where we want to be, and are we on the right path? A big thing I've been reflecting on recently is I think a lot of suffering comes from overly attaching to things, overly attaching to things like preferences and expectations. And I think Dr. Joe Dispenza does talk about this idea that, have your intention, have that vision, have the goal, whatever it may be, but then at the same time kind of surrender to it. And it's something that I'm really seeing a lot at the moment, which is either attaching to like a vision of what you want for that experience to be like. And the problem then is if it doesn't meet that expectation, there is a void, and that is going to create a degree of upset or frustration or resentment, whatever the actual context may be of the situation. So I'm becoming an increasing fan of not saying that we're not going to have preferences or expectations, but not attaching heavily to them. Because it's that attachment that I think causes a lot of the issues. And that is true for our health journeys as well. I think the more we can accept where we currently are, the easier it is to get somewhere else.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up. Resiliency, which you mentioned earlier, that's actually been like a key concept I've been kind of digging at a little bit. And I'm going to have my friend Dr. Tina on here because we were at a conference and we started, because she's kind of this punk rock naturopathic doctor chick, and she loves lifting weights and swinging kettlebells. And so we were more talking about strength training and fitness training to develop resilience as part of functional medicine, really. And so then we got into the subject of like, resilience is key. And so that's where, even like with my plant children, which it's funny, like nobody ever really taught me how to raise plants or grow plants, but they seem to be doing it right. And so I'm kind of like, I'm touching them more and moving them around, because I'm like, plants are supposed to be touched by animals. Like they need that stimuli that then develops that resilience, both physically, energetically, emotionally. Because we have to have that resilience to bounce back in life. And that is that kind of external stimuli that we need to then challenge our homeostatic mechanisms of like, okay, well, we develop that resilience and we're able, it's not really any different than like, being exposed to some kind of, virus or bacteria. And, we need that to kind of trigger that immune system. And, but anyways, you mentioned the suffering and the attachment to expectations and whatnot. And I was really thinking lately, or something I've really started observing is how, I feel like most of our suffering is really self-induced, and I find it to a lot of times be when our outward actions or outward energetic flow, is out of alignment with our innermost truths. When we speak our truth, when we live our truth, which also means we have to dig deep to find what is our truth, or what do we think it is right now. But then we have to be living that with our outward energetic experience on our earth walk. And otherwise, if we are kind of this attachment to this fallacy or this fantasy or whatever it is, we're just setting ourselves up for some serious shit.
Yeah, well, one of the most common things I see is attachment to, I've got to eat this certain way, or I've got to take these certain supplements, or I've got to do X, Y, Zs because that's what I've read. There's a lack of trust. There's often a lack of trust in our own bodies, and we are seeking that certainty from a blog article, and we don't even know who's written it sometimes. And I understand why we do that. I've been there in my own health journey, but I think one of the things that we have to really do with our clients these days is help them gain trust back in their body and listen to it again. And that comes back to creating space in our days to be able to do that. Now, there are always going to be exceptions to the rule. I mean, I didn't realize there are like departments apparently, or institutions and things like this, where the people are supporting individuals who have been to like meditation retreats and have basically had a really negative response to the experience. So we talk about, obviously, psychedelics are huge at the moment, and we talk about the bad trip and how set and setting are important in that. But there seem to be these sort of bad experiences that people can have when they go away for a meditation weekends, week, day. And there is, I think it was in the book, we're going to have to look at backwards again, the arts of losing control.
Yeah.
And he gives an example of this person who went away for a week retreat. For the next like 6 years, she had to stay at home. She had to have support and use the couch to keep herself up. She described it, I think, as a kind of losing her ego for that amount of time. She had lost her boundaries. And I use that as an extreme example because if you do have an individual with childhood trauma or something that they have pushed down that they haven't fully dealt with, the last thing they need at that point in time, especially if they're lacking resiliency, is to sit down in a quiet room and allow these things to bubble up without the ability, without the resources to then deal with it. So I think we sometimes can use these interventions when we don't have the experience, knowledge, or skill set, where we're thinking we're doing a good thing. Yeah, go and meditate, aim for 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
But actually it could be the last thing that they need at that point in time. And that comes back to this idea of resilience, not just being a physical thing. I 100% agree that physical resilience can have a ripple effect into spiritual, mental, and emotional resilience. But we need to be mindful of what resources does this individual have in those 4 areas, and is that going to influence what recommendations we're going to make at that point in time. There's an amazing paper called, the title of the paper is about acquired resilience. And they kind of talk about how, like we discuss acquired immunity, how we probably through evolution have had acquired resilience. And they spoke about these stresses that we have evolved with, such as UV radiation and sunlight, such as fasting or hunger, physical exercise, hypoxia, and changes to temperature, hot and cold climates. And their basic argument was, we don't have these things anymore. We've lost that acquired resiliency, and what we need to do is go and listen a little bit to maybe Wim Hof and get into a cold environment or a cold shower. We need to do a little bit of intermittent fasting to the level that we can tolerate. We need to do a bit of physical exercise to a level that we can tolerate, etc., and start to build that resilience back up. And I just think that paper like really hit the nail on the head.
I think you're so right. It is, that's what's kind of funny about it. A big part of this year for me has kind of involved like reconnecting with my roots because, like, okay, it started as a trainer and I got just so tired of the limited scope of the fitness world and the fitness industry. And, it was just very like, precision nutrition, behavior modification of very, very annoyingly basic nutritional principles with, workout. And then it was just fitness nutrition. But the funny thing, as I've been, because then I swung really hard the other way. And then, now I'm traveling around lecturing doctors about like mold toxicity and stuff. But then, I swung to this side, but then I see like, oh shit, like when I did that, there's this huge gap that it seems like not a lot of other practitioners are doing anything about to some degree. Just still very like, okay, so, what test do we run? What supplement or medication do we give? And and I'm like, well, shit, that's not the point either. You know what I mean? And so then it's had me reflecting on just the basic principle, personal training 101 or fitness training 101, specific adaptation to impose demand. And then it's like you start applying that said principle to the psycho-emotional and the spiritual and everything else. And it's like, yeah, and I'm really big on kind of more the environmental medicine approach because it's like, if you're trying to improve the health of an organism, I mean, isn't step one kind of looking at the environment of the organism? And so I love what you're saying about, yeah, the UV stimulation or not always having food or getting exposed to cold and all of these different adaptive mechanisms that we're going to have to build resilience. And I mean, that's the whole point of working out, right? And so like you said with the woman who, okay, the meditation and then not being prepared for what that would evoke and what traumas that might release, what kind of toxic stored energy that might bring up or bubble up. And it's no different than somebody decides, okay, well, I need to get healthy, I need to get fit. They haven't been doing any physical training and now they're getting smashed in the gym by, themselves or a trainer or a CrossFit coach or whatever it is. Their body is not prepared for that level of, training yet. So it's kind of the same thing with psycho-emotional spiritual. It's almost like we have to be able to do a bit of an assessment to kind of gauge where are they psycho-emotionally, spiritually, and how do we start applying these therapeutic interventions like meditation or plant medicine or whatever it is that is just taking that time of, okay, let's step back, let's introspect, let's start digging into our soul a little bit. But, just like with working out, and this is something I've gained a lot of, I really feel in the past 2 years, I've had a pretty tremendous awakening in my own life. Before it was kind of stumbling around in the dark and it's like, well, I feel this energy. I feel this, but I don't know what this is or what to do with it. And then it kind of like smack, and the lights turn on. It's like, oh shit, like got a lot to explore. But you said something earlier too, I wanted to touch on because I'm huge on ego work. Like I think ego work, which is kind of becoming like a thing now and like a more accepted practice amongst especially millennials, this idea of like, wow, we've lost control of our ego as a mass collective consciousness. And so then it's kind of this like, well, shit, what is the ego? And one thing I found is sometimes it's almost like we deconstruct it and we dissect it to the point of like, we are almost kind of killing our ego sometimes or detaching too much from it. And it's like, well, ego is a part of us. And my perception of ego, my working perception, if we will, is kind of this like, I think our ego is this sort of primordial defense mechanism of self-interest that propels us towards continuity. Like if an organism doesn't have this kind of intrinsic desire to continue, well, nature doesn't work. The bacteria wants to proliferate. The humans want to spread. And something that kind of sucks is like, well, our species is very much parasitic to the planet. That's a very shitty reality of being. And so, riddle me this, Alex Manos. This is something actually just recently I've been, writing about in my notebook here. But I've been thinking about how you look at animals in the wild versus humans. Like, humans are in a class of their own. There are no other humans that come close to the kind of cognitive abilities of humans. And so I've been kind of thinking about, like, okay, so what makes us so damn special, or what makes us think we're so damn special? And it's like, well, it's our capacity for higher intellect, higher reasoning. But it's led us down this path that we're at now. And, chronic disease at an all-time high. And I just had a little flowery post the other day about how, if you let societal trends dictate your beliefs, your behavior, like, you are statistically inclined to become sick. You are statistically inclined to become depressed, lonely, and we see in the scientific literature, like, lonely is its own kind of predictive all-cause mortality indice, whereas having a sense of purpose increases longevity. And so then it's kind of this, like, all right, well, that desire of ours to have that continuity, but then there's the path of the parasite versus, like, the path of the higher self. And I think controlling our ego and doing that ego work has a big determining effect on kind of which side we're going down. And so I've been thinking about, because I stay up at night, like, how do we course correct the damage that we're doing to this planet? And something I've been coming back to is, humans have a much greater capacity to envision what could be. And that strips us out of the infinite here and now. You look at animals in the wild, the lion isn't really thinking too far into the future of, like, well, if I start accumulating my resources, we could build up, like, a hella pride that, like, takes over Africa. No, the lion is like, okay, I ate, cool. I'm going to play, cool. I'm going to sleep, cool. And so I feel like, in a way, the human's ability to, project our ego into the future, to envision and to, then manifest that reality. And that has come at the cost of, making ourselves sick and tired and destroying the planet at the same time. And it's like, we need to reel that back into the conscious, the present, I'm just kind of throwing shit out there at this point.
That's awesome.
I feel like you would dig that, though, kind of this foresight thing. It's like, oh shit, like, we sort of,
yeah,
took a hard steer there, humans.
I think it partly comes back to, we have these primal needs and desires that now can be so abundantly met that that's the problem.
Yes.
Basically.
Instant
yeah. And, when resources were limited, accumulating them made sense.
Yeah.
Now we just don't even need to.
No.
Shops are open 24/7, etc.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big factor. But one of the things that I've been reflecting on and thinking about. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Oh, thank you. Is how significant the disconnection from nature is.
Yeah.
So I think that's huge for me, and I'm kind of almost, I feel like I'm being drawn away from my career and what it has been with the nutrition, the personal training, the functional medicine, and more to an environmental, natural, even more holistic side of work. Because I think that's, as you said earlier, where kind of money's at. That's where things happen. That's where people shift. And when I say that's where the money's at, like you, I'm not literally meaning I'm going to earn more money by doing that.
Right. Probably not. Probably less. Probably if we're being honest. Yeah.
But the last 6 months, I've been doing a lot of reading on sort of the psychedelic side of things. Last month, I had my my psychedelic
Yeah,
experience.
we got to talk all about that.
And one thing I read this morning, I'm reading, I think the book's called The Way of the Shaman. And they spoke about how to come up with ayahuasca, the thought was it's trial and error, that they combined these two plant medicines together over what must have been tens and thousands of different trials, and they then suddenly found this. What the actual indigenous people have said, and what they all say, is that the plants essentially spoke to them, that they were shown to combine these plants together. And there's this argument that that is how connected they are with nature. It wasn't some chance that happened over like 10,000 years of trying all the different plants in the Amazonian rainforest. I'm not sure what the maths is, but it's going to be pretty scary. They all claim, apparently, that, they were essentially instructed, told, however you want to describe it, that this is what they should now do. And I know that sounds incredibly wacky and things like this, but when you have spent time reading about all of these case studies, even some of the anecdotal evidence, and also the evidence that is coming out of places like Johns Hopkins and Imperial College London, KCL in London, it is mind-blowing. And going back to the idea of the ego, the lead facilitator at Synthesis, where I had my experience, was basically like, yeah, Alex, you experienced the death of the ego. And I'm like, yeah, that's the only way to describe what happened.
Yeah.
Because I was formless. My body literally kind of melted into the mattress I was lying on. And that was really scary. And it took me a while to let go. Yeah. And I can only now see how that is my ego. The ego is a thing trying to keep control.
Yeah.
It's keeping your identity there. It's keeping that narrative that you've created. It's keeping that mask and the walls that we've all set up for ourselves. And I think the stronger that ego is, my theory, and I think this is a general consensus, is it becomes harder to surrender. But once you have surrendered to the plant medicine, that's when all the beautiful stuff happens. So it's almost like a barometer. Like, it was really interesting because we all went into the room. There were, I think, 9 of us, and we started munching on our truffles after having the tea. And everyone's lying down with their eye mask on, their duvet on, and they warn us of nausea. And boy, I was like the only one who experienced bad nausea. But to the point where I had to get up, I left the room, went to the toilet in case I was going to throw up. And at this point, which was probably about 10 minutes after having finished my truffles, things are moving. So like, there were these tiles in the bathroom with lizards on. The lizards are just crawling around the wall. Yeah. So I'm in this tiny cubicle, worrying that I'm gonna vomit, trying to figure out whether I need to pee, not wanting to go back into the room because this is really hard and I'm not enjoying it at all.
Yeah.
And I'm literally in this cubicle for 5 minutes going, shit, like there's no turning back. Like, it's not like I can do anything. I have to surrender somehow to the experience. So I walk out, one of the facilitators is there. She kind of looks at me. She says, what do you want to do? I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know whether I don't know whether I want to go for a walk outside. I'm pretty sure I don't want to go back in there.
Yeah.
She gives me a quick massage, and like, it's the only thing I can do. So I go back in, put my eye mask on, and then over the next 15 to 20 minutes, I am constantly pulling my eye mask off, looking up, trying to basically get back to reality and calm myself down. Because every time I put the eye mask on and I try and relax, I'm dissolving. Basically, yeah. I'm literally sinking into my mattress and I can feel myself melting away. I'm starting to see music. And it got to the point for me, and this is, I think, the really interesting part around psychedelics and how they have an intuitive healing property to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to jump around a bit now, but
very good.
There were many times during the experience that I had no idea whether there was actual music being played in the room or if the music was coming from within me.
Mm-hmm.
What I knew for certain was, well, let me put this another way. What it felt like was it was coming from within me. It was not coming through my ear. It was not coming from the speaker that was about 10 foot away from me. It was very much like originating within me. It was the most beautiful experience that I've ever had, easily. And what's interesting was they, as you probably know, and as many listeners I'm sure know, because there are going to be people who are way more experienced than me on this, they ask you to have an intention for the ceremony, for the experience. And interestingly, a lot of us had a similar intention. Mine was very much around connectedness. Mm-hmm. I wanted to kind of reconnect with myself. I wanted to have a stronger connection with my wife and my family and my friends, and just generally feel more connected to the world, because certainly at times over the years, I felt relatively disconnected, I guess more spiritually than anything else. Now, what happened in the experience was this complete and utter connection to the music. Like I have never felt connection to music like that, or almost anything. Like it was just indescribable, really. But I also experienced the death of the ego, and I experienced being in a place where for half an hour or so, I genuinely was thinking I had a psychotic break. And I wondered whether I had lost my mind, and I was one of these very few examples of someone who shouldn't have done psychedelics. Mm-hmm. I was in the word that innately came to me was the cosmos. I didn't even know at the time what really the cosmos was, but that seemed to fit this kind of place where I was. And I just had these thoughts. I was like, are people, standing over me right now in the room? Who are they trying to like resuscitate me, kind of thing? How the hell am I going to get to a plane tomorrow when I'm not in the body? Mm-hmm. Am I ever going to see my wife and parents again? Like these thoughts were coming up, but in a weirdly calm manner, mm-hmm. because it was so beautiful at the same time. I remember thinking, if this is what the rest of my like existence is, I'm kind of okay with it.
Yeah.
It was that magical and beautiful. But what was interesting, and it took me a few hours post the trip to sort of put this together, but I had disconnected from music in my real life. I used to love singing, just in the kitchen, in the car, stuff like that. I used to like listening to music, etc. That had sort of slipped away. Life had got a little bit more serious, etc. And I experienced during the trip, the ceremony, a complete and utter disconnection from myself and my family and my friends. Even though in my real life, I did have that to quite a big degree, I just hadn't appreciated and accepted it as much as I could. So my reflection from the experiences was this kind of, wow, this medicine has given me an experience with music to reignite that experience and that connection in real life. And it showed me what it's like to be completely disconnected from people who actually I was connected with, but I wasn't putting as much, let's just say, emphasis on those relationships as I want to be. So it showed me connection through complete disconnection and really the death of the ego. So disconnection from myself as well. Mm-hmm. And then, the day after we have the integration day, so there's journaling, there's dancing, there's shaking, there's all sorts of things to help you integrate the experience. And I was at the airport listening to music that was just on in the airport speakers and starting to dance a little bit and just going, this is just beautiful. Like some of that ego had broken down and I was comfortable doing things that I may not have been previously. And then on the plane, I was journaling. I was, having these eureka moments and realizations, and I was like, let's just connect to music again. I was crying for like half an hour of the hour journey back. I was like, the music was so deep, so meaningful, so moving. And then you've got the transition back to reality, which also is just challenging. One of the things that I didn't realize as much was how challenging it can be for people that love you who just cannot understand the profound experience you just had.
Mm-hmm.
So then suddenly there's this, you know, in the grand scheme of things, tiny voids where you've had this experience, you're trying to articulate it to people who haven't had a psychedelic experience. And when you're talking about a high dose psychedelic experience, there's no describing it. People describe it as it's indescribable. So you've got all sorts of strange challenges that come up. Others who just don't really seem particularly interested, even though you're so passionate about wanting to kind of say, hey, I just had this amazing experience. And then obviously there's going back to the mundane 9 to 5, so to speak.
Yeah.
And even though I'm incredibly passionate about what I do, there were definitely questions around, man, I've got some imbalances here, even though this is my passion, like this is not cool. So there's those kind of things that obviously come up. And then for me, there was almost this little disappointment that unlike others, I feel some of those things have not stuck. You know, I think some of those neural pathways for me were so hardwired after like 13 years of self-employment, being single most of the time, living alone for some of it, like being almost dysfunctionally independent. That's what Holden talks about. That I've had to be really mindful and try really hard to stay connected to the experience. And I think it was Sam Harris in his book, I think it's called Waking Up. He talks about how, and this was really nice. He talks about how you kind of you forget the experience. It's such of a different world that it's hard to stay connected. And I was worried that it was just me. And when I read that in his book, I was like, oh, okay, you know, it's not just me having detached from it. Because it does feel now like an experience, but also very much like a story. You know, I've told it so many times, I've kind of reacted it. And I definitely feel that another high dose experience is due soon as a booster, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Just to start breaking down some of those obviously very well established neural pathways. You know, one of those examples of you're skiing down a slope, and if you keep skiing the same one, it gets harder and harder. I just think I've got some really well skied slopes. And one of the things I've done is I've booked holotropic breathwork for January, which was the closest I could book it for. I'm going to be going to 5 rhythm dance classes, which is all very much about spontaneous dancing on your own to music. There are 5 types of dance, but within that you just go for it. So I'm trying to build into my, I guess, routine non-psychedelic tools to potentially create those ecstatic experiences, but secondly, break down some of the barriers. You know, it's in some ways, I just think it's so crazy that we can feel uncomfortable dancing in public. Like that's pretty weird. But that's definitely me. You know, I struggled Friday evening, the night before the ceremony. The 9 of us were in a room. We had eye masks on and we had to dance to music. The only people who could see me dance were the facilitators at the retreat. Like the most beautiful people I've ever met in my entire life. You want to engage with spiritually whole people. Those guys are the guys to go and hang out with. Like it was amazing. But I couldn't do it. Like my dance was just the chicken head dance. Like that's all I could do. Even though there was about 7 people who could see me, no one else could. I still struggled. And I think that shows you kind of some of the barriers you can put up. So a thing that I'm really passionate about now is putting myself in uncomfortable situations and to grow from them, whether that's dancing in public, whether that's, you know, going back to breath work. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is we did a transformational breath session the morning of the ceremony. And within that, I was in tears, both laughing and crying. And that was purely through breath work. So that was like a huge eye-opener to me. Again, going back to some of the stuff we mentioned at the beginning, what do we have access to that we potentially just don't have the knowledge or skill set to access. And for me, the whole breathwork thing was like this just eureka moment of, oh my God, you know, I can experience this joy, this love, this happiness that is having me uncontrollably laughing. And I can experience this deep sadness afterwards that I have this within me, and I am not showing it on a regular basis. I am not showing this joy, this playfulness to my wife or my parents. And it was really upsetting, but in a very warm, like nourishing, gentle way. And that is, I guess, part of my mission now is to stay connected to that, to do breath work, to do spontaneous dance, to journal, to break down some of those barriers that we could call the ego, and to, in the future, help others with that as well. Because I'm not sure if we mentioned on my podcast, Brendan, but, you know, I've for a long time had this idea of health being around free-flowing energy. You know, the martial artist, the yogi, the Tai Chi master, waves of the ocean, whatever you want to use as kind of the metaphor and analogy. It's this idea that if we are to be truly healthy, we have to have free-flowing energy within us.
Yeah.
One thing I haven't mentioned that's just come into that is I experienced my second chakra for the first time ever during my experience. And that for me was like this, okay, I now am completely sold on the concept of chakras, because that is the only thing it could be. This very localized, almost ping pong size ball of warm energy that was exactly where the second chakra is, with certain characteristics of the second chakra being true to my life as well. So it wasn't just like this physical sensation I experienced. Some of the stuff that I need to work through is related to the second chakra and a blockage there. I was just like, my mind was blown with kind of that element of things as well. So I think, you know, one of the things that I've found where to go and who I'm going to see, but I haven't yet booked it, is kind of chakra healing, essentially. I'm so curious to go and have some of that done to see if anything happens. Again, I'm not attaching to it. I'm just super curious. And it's what brings a spark to my day now. These kind of topics and conversations, like we need to let go. We need to surrender. We need to have fun. We need to be more playful. We need to take our health less seriously and have that broader perspective. And I left Synthesis really strongly believing there are obviously individuals that shouldn't do psychedelics. That seems like a general consensus, but I think who that is very hard to say. I think the one categorical thing that I've heard through sort of interviews that I've listened to, etc., is people with maybe a tendency for schizophrenia. But obviously it's being used in treatment-resistant depression, in addiction, in various mental health states with really great success. And I thought what was interesting was an interview I listened to recently where it is the most successful thing for quitting smoking. Like if you look at the comparisons of the different tools that are out there. And yet obviously with the counterculture movement, everyone was doing psychedelics and everyone was smoking. And the guy kind of used this as the example of that's how powerful having the intention is when you go into the experience. If you want to quit smoking and that is your intention from your psychedelic ceremony, then there's a really high success rate. But if you don't want to quit, then obviously it's not going to magically do something.
Right.
And I just, it was a life-changing experience that requires a lot of work at the same time. Otherwise, all it is an experience, and almost like a drug experience. You know, if you're not going to integrate the lessons that come up, then you could argue that's all it was. Apart from any of the immediate behavioral change that can take place, but I kind of described it as it can be a catalyst for behavioral change, because again, as Michael Pollan will say, you're shaking the snow globe. You know, you are getting parts of the brain to communicate with one another that don't usually communicate. So there's this whole cascade of pathways that like kind of open up. There's an amazing image from a lecture. I can only assume it was like some brain MRI scan or something they did, but it was just imagine a sphere of how the brain normally communicates. So looking at like the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala and all the different compartments. And then what happens during a psychedelic experience, and suddenly all of these different compartments are communicating with one another. And this is the idea of shaking up the snow globe. You know, what are you going to be able to kind of, so to speak, dislodge, and how is that going to allow you to establish healthier or more positive behaviors, or whatever it is that you are trying to achieve through your use of psychedelics. And it's just such a powerful tool, I think, for that reason. I mean, Synthesis have now just gone to a 5-day retreat where you do 2 ceremonies. So you do kind of a low level and then a higher one as your second ceremony. And I think my assumption based on my experience is if you suspect that some of your behaviors may be pretty well embedded in like your neurology, that maybe that's a really good option. Or certainly going back 3-6 months later, for me, that is the way it's probably will work best. But again, it comes back to how well you integrated it. You know, are you journaling daily? Do you have those new practices to help you kind of stay connected to the truth? I think it's Alan Watts has a quote along the lines of, once you've heard the message, hang up the phone. And I kind of feel like I could, in some ways, like that message of, I experienced the death of the ego. I experienced being what I feel is the place where we all reside energetically and spiritually. There was this moment where I was in the cosmos and I heard one of the other attendees laugh. She was obviously having a great time in her half of the room. And I just broke out in like just the deepest, most genuine laughter. And it's hard to describe. It was like this epiphany, a moment of, oh my God, this is where we're all from. And we have all created our own mask. You know, we are standing behind this narrative, this mask that we have created for ourselves, and that has been put on us through various, I guess, elements of society and people that have been within our lives. And it was, in this experience, it was kind of comical. It was this, oh my God, we're all so stupid. You know, let's just let go of the mask of the ego. Let's be who we truly are. And that is love. You know, that is, we are all connected. That is, we are part of the universe, and we are part of nature. And I think this theory that the counterculture movement and these hippies, so to speak, who were loving nature and protecting nature, that was driven by the nationwide use or global use of psychedelics. And I do believe that. I think it brings you back to nature and connection. And they were obviously, you know, essentially shut down, and it was made illegal, and everyone knows the story.
Right.
So, you know, for me, my vision is I want to be involved in that world, you know, whether that's going and getting some sort of psychotherapy type degree so I can do integration work when it becomes legal, or whatever it may be. I just think it's that powerful. And you and I and practitioners listening will have clients who struggle with the behavioral side. That's clinically what we see day in, day out. It's not anything other than there is a behavioral element, which is often driven from an emotional element. Most of my clients intellectually, rationally know what they should do to a large degree. You know, a bit more exercise, a bit less crap food, etc. You know, there are things that they know they should be doing but struggle to do, as there are with me, as there are with most people. And I think shaking the snow globe in however you want to do it, it doesn't have to be psychedelics. It could be through dance, you know, kind of getting you outside your comfort zone,
Mm-hmm.
I think, is huge when we're talking about healthcare.
Yeah.
Because we need to shift our perspective of who we are, what we're capable of. We need to shift our rituals and habits often. And I think this is like a really great way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And it's really exciting to, which I should start by saying, like, I've never done true plant medicine, which sometimes surprises people because some of the shit that comes out of my mouth. But I know a lot of people that have done a lot of plant medicine, and it's very high on my list of things to do in 2020. And I kind of consider myself right now, because I'm not being like a little kid about it, of like, oh, I just can't wait to go trip balls and whatever comes from that. It's like, no, I recognize, I recognize really what it is, what the purpose is. And so I kind of consider myself now, I feel very kind of content as I'm moving in that direction. I could see myself becoming a shaman eventually. Like,
Right.
I would do something like that. But I'm just enjoying kind of this process of, I've become, in a way, almost kind of, and I challenge myself, I question myself a little bit on, like, Brendan, maybe just observe without judgment, just kind of observe your own behavior a little bit. Because I've kind of become addicted to um, hunting down weaknesses or voids, in my character, in my soul. Because, like, I genuinely want to, be the best I can be, or, like, reach that ultimate level of self-actualization is really what it is. And so then, you are kind of constantly challenging your belief system, and, what's the story I'm telling myself? And, ultimately the only thing that I feel we do kind of know, is our energetic intuition, and I think intuition is kind of this ultimate guiding um, energy that, it's guiding us towards source. It's guiding us towards truth. That's what I feel, this intuition that we all, kind of acknowledge, but we don't cultivate. And in today's culture, we've disconnected so much from nature. We've disconnected so much from ancient wisdoms and values that our species has always kind of cherished and taught and practiced and preached throughout any successful civilization throughout history. And we're just so disconnected from all of that, and technology, which is really a pretty young phenomena. These things didn't exist, 15 years ago.
Mm.
Uh, and so now it's like I was thinking about this. I wrote something the other day because, like, neurochemistry was really my first kind of scientific love, because I always struggled with depression or ADHD and stuff. And so neurochemistry was the obvious, like, oh, well, let me dive in there. I was writing about something the other day because with behavior, I think we are all very much driven by behavior. And I've always looked at it as, like, with the functional medicine model or holistic healing model, and I actually literally put this in my courses that I am finishing the recordings for right now, and I teach in my course, like, hey, physiology, psychology, it's the yin yang. You can't separate it. The physiology is heavily influenced by the psychology and vice versa, and it's just this infinite, thing that we have to be addressing all components of. Because, and that's what I love about nature, or like with mold toxicity, which is kind of the subject everybody knows me for at this point. But I love it because it's such an environmental thing. I mean, fungi is its own kingdom, right? You've got plants, animals, fungi. Fungi is its own freaking kingdom of life on this planet that we've co-evolved with, coexisted with. Fungi has been on this planet way longer than humans have. It's extremely sophisticated and adapted. Yeah, and it has its own defense mechanism of mycotoxins, and oh damn, those things can make us really, really sick. You know what I mean? And it's stuff like that. But I was thinking about it the other day. So certainly there is that more just kind of physiological, like, oh, well, there is, you know, a biological defense mechanism coming from this organism that we're coexisting with in nature, or now in our pseudo cave environments, you know, and I could go into a riff about that. But as far as behavior, though, too, I was writing this the other day of, you know, 1 in 6 Americans are on antidepressant medications. That's kind of the current statistic.
Wow.
1 in 6, you know, and that used to be me. I used to be on 4 different psychiatric drugs at the same time, highest prescribable dose, and I still felt awful. And I was in a toxic relationship and a toxic home that was very musty and moldy. So, you know, it's, I'm living my truth. And that's where it's such a pleasure to just, you know, like, oh yeah, I lecture to doctors about mold toxicity and I get on podcasts and riff about psycho-emotional stuff. But I'm just living my truth. I'm just walking the path and, you know, navigating it as it comes. But like with behavior, you know, serotonin, that's where the psychological research and everything, it's really just pointing us back to this kind of intuitive nature connection where, you know, delayed gratification is associated with a greater serotonin response. You know, like we know that, oh, you know, how many likes did I get on my Instagram post? Like dopamine, you know, great reward sensation and all of that. But then with, you know, serotonin. So my point being kind of this like, well, all right, so serotonin, you know, our happy, joyful neurotransmitter. 1 in 6 Americans are on antidepressants, probably SSRIs, to, you know, artificially raise the serotonogenic, you know, response. And it's like, well, wait a second, delayed gratification. So really, you have the power to give yourself a greater serotonin response by changing the behavior and doing things in a way that induces that sensation of delayed gratification instead of instant gratification. Actually, you know, where I first kind of got caught onto this subject was precision nutrition level 2. You know about precision nutrition?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's become like the biggest nutrition coaching certification in the world, and that was my very first one, and I was in the first level 2 master class ever. And they're all about psychology. They're all about behavior. You know, without behavior modification, you know, like how can you follow a functional medicine protocol without changing behavior? It is all ultimately just behavior modification. And to change the behavior, we have to change the belief system. And so, you know, with delayed gratification, all right, well, how do you practice delayed gratification through behavior change? And it's like, well, it requires discipline. You know what I mean? Because you can't just, oh, you know, instant gratification is like the opposite of discipline. You know, it's just like, give me that now. I don't want to work for it. I don't want to be without it. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I want that gratification, mind, body, soul, whatever it is, right now. And, you know, that's very much a dopamine. And so part of it is we've built this culture, we've built this society, you know, highly stimulating. It's very ego seductive. And that's where, you know, our societal model, our social trends, our behavior as a collective is hurting us and making us sad, lonely, depressed. And so, but it's like, but we have that conscious power of choice. We can choose to change our behavior that, you know, is giving us this delayed gratification, which is associated with a greater serotonin response. So I was kind of savage about it. It's just like, you know what, sometimes you have to have a little bit of, you know, discipline, practice a little discipline to give yourself that serotonin response. And that's where I think, you know, plant medicine is a conscious expanding tool. And, you know, Joe Dispenza, I like his attitude about it, because I think some people, yeah, I mean, it's all about how you use it. But these different plant medicines, okay, well, they are working with our natural biochemistry and biology. You know,
Right.
Big Pharma produces synthetic stuff that, you know, it alters our natural biochemistry. It's plant medicine, no different. It's just a little bit more raw, a little bit more less refined and whatever, tampered with, and just kind of pure from nature. And our species has always experimented and played with that, and it has helped us develop our different spiritual belief systems that help guide us. Today we live in the world of artificial technology and very, quantify, rationalize. We've limited ourselves very much. And so I like how Joe talks about, using plant medicine as that catalyst to kind of awaken neural networks that you've just never used. It's kind of like, you take a brand new personal training client through a workout, for the first time. What do they always say? Wow, I'm sore in places I didn't even know existed. It's just kind of like, it's a lot like that, I think, with plant medicine, of using parts of our brain, awakening parts of our psyche and soul and consciousness that in the very worldly environment that is our modern society, we just never tap into, and it's so closed off. But as he says, the work is really, you might stimulate those neural networks, and it's like, oh, I didn't even know that path existed. But now, because of this kind of catalyst, this awakening, this profound experience, I know that there's this other path. But then you've got to put in the work and, integrate that back to reality. And that's where, I think it's something to be done, responsibly and with intention, because you want to make that a productive experience. I've definitely seen some people go down the rabbit hole and never come back.
Yeah. I think set and setting is huge. And like, we had one guy in our group who did no prep. Like he literally didn't really have a clue what he was about to do. And he had a little moment, as most of us did during the experience. But when you've got people who are experienced and supporting you, when you are experiencing that bit of anxiety and you're struggling to let go, then you're in such a safe setting that I do feel there are an awful lot of people who can go and do that sort of experience, even if they do have a degree of psychological distress, for a term. I think that set and setting is, as everyone discusses, is the most important thing. But one thing also, going back to one thing you mentioned, with this idea of spirituality, self-growth, being the best version of yourself, like so many of us are seeking, I'd be interested in your thoughts around, do you feel it can create a vicious loop? And what I mean by that is, I've had two quite deep conversations with clients recently whereby, and I think this is relatively common sometimes in the spiritual world, people are seeking themselves, improvement, connection, but by default, they're never going to find it. It goes back to Robert Holden's idea of self-acceptance as the prerequisite for self-development. And I sometimes wonder, what are we seeking? And are we, by doing that, we're basically saying there is something outside of us that we need. There's a piece missing. There's a piece of knowledge, or there's a piece of something that we need to find on our next retreat or in our next meditation session. And then we'll be whole. Then we'll be connected. Then we'll fulfill the criteria of being a spiritual person. And I have so been there. I've been like, should I get rid of my TV? Like that? That feels like that's what a spiritual person would do.
Right. I don't watch cable. I don't even have a cable subscription. I'm so woke. You know what I mean?
Like, I've done this a lot over decades. And then Ram Dass has the saying, what's he call it? He calls it phony holy. Like, don't let things go when they're not ready to be let go.
Right.
Like, Katie, my wife, and I have just come across Stranger Things. We're obsessed with it. We love watching that episode. I am not ready to give up TV. I'm not that enlightened yet, whatever you want to call it. And by default, you could argue that means I am enlightened. I'm not forcing things that I think should be done if you're going to be an enlightened person.
Right.
And I'm really like, I'm quite mindful of this when I'm speaking to people these days. Like, are they down the wrong rabbit hole because essentially they're not accepting either who they are as they are at the moment, or they're not accepting an element of their life. And it's not that we don't want those things to improve, but we can want them to improve while at the same time accepting exactly how it is. It's this paradox of spirituality.
Yeah.
And I think that's really big. I had one other point I was going to say, but it's gone. Oh, that was it. There was a story. So I got this amazing client who now is a good friend. And he told me this story, and I'm going to paraphrase, which he paraphrased. So it's pretty much a completely different story now. But the message will be the same, which is there was a guy on his path to enlightenment. He had hired a guru, and he was sitting there one day meditating. And his guru came round, checked in on him, and was like, "How are you doing, Mark?" And Mark was like, had an expression on his face of just sheer effort, like trying so hard to meditate and not think and have that clear mind. And he was like, I'm just not there yet. And his guru went away, and his guru came back a few weeks later. Mark was sitting there meditating, and the guru goes, "Mark, how are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, hi, Matthew. Yeah, I'm doing really well." And it's this idea of not having expectations, preferences, thoughts about what it should be. And I love that idea. I laughed about it for several days afterwards because it resonates with me, this idea of be quiet, I'm meditating.
Right.
It's like, again, rigidity. That is not being an enlightened spiritual person in my eyes at the moment. It's being fluid. It's adapting to what's going on and just surrendering to the experience as it is at that point in time. And I think if we can truly start to do that, then we're in a really great space.
I'm glad that we're bringing this up because certainly it is really cool. And I've discussed with people how, like, okay, technology and well, technology is a tool that we created, and it's a double-edged sword that, we created the tool just like a real sword. So what side of the sword you're swinging with or whatever, like that's your choice, bro. So, my point being, we can use the tool of technology. So that's to say, I do see, through technology in the internet world, I do feel that I'm seeing an increasing movement in awareness within the psycho-emotional spiritual realm. There's definitely it seems like different camps, or there's all these different kind of spiritual Instagram pages with hundreds of thousands of followers, and some of these I like looking at some of their quotes every damn day. It's prompting and nice, but we are also kind of in this place of, okay, we are sort of accepting this sort of spiritual movement that is rising. And I do think there is a little bit of a mass awakening occurring right now, which is exciting to see, but it's also like we got to check ourselves because we don't have a damn clue what we're doing in a lot of ways. And I do think that the spiritual thing, I liked what you said about the TV of like, well, a spiritual person doesn't watch TV and all that. But that's kind of the thing about spirituality is I think sometimes we can, use it as, another projection of ego in a lot of ways. Cause, with like, it's kind of like, are you living eudaimonically versus hedonically? Are you an organism that is, running towards pleasure and running away from pain and fear? Or are we living more eudaimonically and pursuing this kind of sense of self-actualization? And the funny thing about the road, the path to enlightenment, nirvana, source, understanding, truth, all of these things, or trying to tap into that kind of fifth dimension, the quantum realm, the realm of unconditional love. But the thing is, it's not, isn't kind of the whole point? Like, it's not a destination. It's not a path that we have to hedonically pursue of, I'm not enough. I'm not spiritual enough. I'm not cool enough. I'm not worthy enough. So then I have to walk this path. I have to do all of these things. I have to strip away. I have to slay and kill and stab my own ego. I have to, have these out of body psychedelic experiences. And it's like, well, that isn't the whole point of spirituality, like the living of truth in the moment, the present, the consciousness. So again, it's like that foresight of, we think of what could be, like think of how much better my life could be if I was more spiritually developed and more spiritually pursued, and I've done all the things. But again, it's like, well, but what is it for? Like, let's bring it back to the conscious present moment and surrender that, like, I am enough. And that's something with like the Toltec wisdom books, Four Agreements and Master of Self and all of those, which I love. I think they're very simple, very powerful, very beautiful books there. But he talks about that a lot, of just it's that unconditional love. And so that's where I think sometimes this notion of we have to pursue this path and do all of this work and whatever, I don't know. I mean, I think maybe what it is more surrendering right now and reconnecting to the realm of unconditional love that's always present all the time. It connects us across the universe all the time. And you spoke to that, you talked about the chakras, and there's part of it too. Sometimes people get a little bit weirded out or lost with the spiritual, but the terminology doesn't really matter if we want to think of it as like the quantum realm, the unconditional love realm, the fifth dimension. But either way, I think it's just all about energy. Everything about our universe, the Saturn's rings or your heart, it's all just matter. It's atoms, it's energy. And what's emotion? Kind of a human fallacy that really is just energy in motion. And we all have our biofield, our frequency. And so, like Joe Dispenza talks about, when we're overly sympathetic and we're ill or stressed or whatever, we're sucking energy out of our own aura, our own biofield, to use that within ourselves. Whereas when we're healthy and we're happy, we're radiating a bigger biofilm, a bigger aura. And that's where, you get a lot of people in the same room, and you can see how their brains will start getting in sync, their heart rate variability. And, it's that model of coherence. And then, his whole thing is like, I think that's his project, is like Project Coherence or something like that, and this idea of like, well, when we as a collective consciousness, we're kind of putting our batteries together, we're combining our energy, we're raising the frequency, and how, oh, well, this energy that then this collective is giving off has healing properties. It reduces crime, it benefits the economy, it heals the planet, it gives off good energy to other people. So I think there's a lot to it. I know I'm kind of all over the place with this, but I think we have to be careful about not turning spiritual practice into a projection of ego or a justification of egotistical practices, because that's kind of the whole point, is to not be slave to our primordial ego, to transcend above the worldly ego seduction and tap into that higher self, which is always there and it's always present. So I think I find myself doing that a lot, of like, almost like, whipping myself and let me hunt down all the weaknesses of my soul. And it's like, but is that the point? Isn't the point to, I'm enough right now, and I'm going to surrender, and I'm going to love and appreciate everything about my reality for where it is right now. I'm going to continue moving into the forward, but I'm here. Yeah, I don't know. So, and down the rabbit hole now.
No, 100%. I think the thing that comes up when you said that was, I think that's where energy medicine is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Because my feeling is that you're not going to rationally improve that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I can't tell myself 1,000 times I'm worthy and then be worthy. Like, it goes so much deeper, and there's going to be all sorts of energetic, emotional stuff that needs to be processed and integrated into your whole. And that's where I think some of these practices, whether is like chakra healing, whether it is psychedelics, whether it is whatever it needs to be, it's working at an energetic, emotional level where I think all the magic truly happens. And I think as soon as you've had a sneak peek into how like transformative that can be, there's no turning back from that argument. I mean, I came away from it for a couple of days where I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do for career? Because like, I'm not interested in which strain of probiotic you should be taking right now. And then I kind of reflected on it. I was like, okay, well, you know, my body is the vessel for my spirits and my soul.
Yeah.
And therefore, what I do is still really important. So I kind of backed off away from panicking that I was in the wrong career.
Right.
But there's a great the preview for Fantastic Fungi, I think, is the film that's, I think, kind of doing the rounds at the moment in the cinemas. There's a scene or recording of a guy who did a psychedelic experience, I think maybe at somewhere like Johns Hopkins or one of the universities studying this, and he was like, you know what, I'm not scared of death anymore. You know, and he's like, it was such like this powerful experience where it's like, I've seen what comes afterwards. I know what I truly am, and therefore I'm not scared anymore. And I feel quite similar. You know, it's this idea, I think I have seen what comes after this physical human life. And it's like, yeah, that's amazing. You know, kind of like, I'm looking forward to it. So it's making the most of this world, and it's leaving it in a better place than I came to it.
Yes.
And it's knowing that this is part of the journey, but it's the human part. And I think there's another part afterwards. And if nothing else, it just feels great to believe that.
Totally. And I'm glad you're saying this too, because something that, you know, I find myself wrestling with, and that's where, again, sometimes it's always a balancing act of, you know, sometimes I'm like, Brendan, you know, that inner judge, the judge is definitely a part of our psyche, but it's, hey, I mean, you know, you kind of need a judge. Like, I don't think we should like damn the judge, but it is that balancing act of, well, we, you know, should judge ourselves to a degree, but not always. Because I'm just like, something I wrestle with, the difference between, you know, because we're all very dynamic beings. I think everybody has traits of narcissism or, you know, traits of egotistical, you know, whatever. Because I mean, you know, like narcissism and that's its own whole thing, you know, oh, he's such a narc and all that shit. You know, that anybody that's ever been in a bad relationship is probably a self-proclaimed expert on narcissism. You know what I mean? But you know, part of it too is kind of that difference between ego and ambition. Because something for me, you know, everything we're talking about, I love to go there. I love to question. The trick is sometimes not like causing this disassociation where it's almost like none of this even matters and we're all just manifestations of the universe experiencing itself. And it's just like, well, you know, you kind of almost like deconstruct the human experience. And if it doesn't matter and it doesn't mean anything, it's not significant, well, then that's going to be how it is because you just manifested that for yourself, you know, whereas that's ultimately what I get back to, though. And that's where, you know, I almost look at it as, and that's where like the podcast is such a passion project, you know, and in full transparency that people don't really understand yet. It's like, you know, the podcast, that's something, you know, I pay money out of my pocket to produce because it's a passion project. And to me, it's serving a greater purpose. Like how I actually pay my bills is running lab tests and teaching people, you know, what they need to be taught based on that. But it all is for the greater purpose of like, I think we owe it to ourselves to make the most out of this beautiful experience. I do, ultimately, if we really zoom out and go full-blown spiritual hippie mode, it's just like, yeah, it's pretty trippy, with this grand universe and all the atoms and the fact that we're here at all, and here for such a blink of an eye, and this kind of transient pseudo-commensal species on the face of this planet. And again, unfortunately, though, if we look at it from a biological kind of evolutionary cut and dry perspective, yeah, our species is parasitic to the planet, and we are the only species on this planet that is really parasitic to the planet. Everything else, it fits in. The mold, which is heterotrophic organism, it's a recycling organism, and there are other parasitic relationships in nature, but there's nothing like the parasitic effect of humans on the face of the planet. And I'm just like, you know what? We owe it to ourselves to make the most out of this beautiful experience that we've been given, because we came from source, we will return to source. And that's where I don't know that I'm at where I want to be with that whole paradigm. I don't, if I died tomorrow, I'd be kind of bummed out, that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. But I'd be a little bit bummed because there's still so much I want to do. There's so much good that I want to do in this world, because it's just like, if we're not trying to make it better for the next people on this planet and leave this planet, this world, just a little bit better than when we came into it, otherwise, what is the point? Not that there has to be a point, but I don't know. I want there to be some kind of point, and I can't see all the darkness in the world, or the greed, or the bad, the yuck. I can't sit by idly. I can't just sit in my nirvana bubble and be like, well, no. So then, it is that integration, right? We have to, challenge our perception of reality, and open our consciousness for the sake of mass healing on a, global and universal level. But yeah, we have to integrate that back to the reality that we live in. And so then it's because I'm right there with you. Sometimes it is like, does this matter that I'm just, give you probiotics and tell you to, stop eating processed food or whatever it is? And it's like, well, sometimes it feels very small and trivial, but it's a part of a bigger. But that's again where I think these types of conversations, right? If all I ever do is, okay, who's the next, client in line that I'm here to service with the service that I provide, that's where I think these types of conversations, this is the way forward, is mass teachings, getting thought. If we can change the thought, the beliefs, and, inspire and educate, this is how we raise the vibration of the whole collective.
Yeah, definitely. We're hardwired to be connected. We are meant to have our tribe, however big that tribe is meant to be. That I think I've heard different things, from 30 to 300 people is kind of what it should be. But that's it. And it's a tricky one, because you can say, what is the point? Why am I here? Doesn't really matter. I'm getting okay with that.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It's a beautiful world.
Yep.
And I am 100% interested in speaking with beautiful people, having beautiful experiences, and learning. There's a book called The Holographic Universe.
Yeah, I got to read that.
And one of the things in it is, we are having this human experience to grow from it, to learn. And then we'll take those lessons with us to the next life. And I just love that idea. We are here to learn. We're maybe here to become whole. Maybe we have an opportunity to really surrender, to lose the ego, and to be that just light bubble of joy that I think is within all of us, that we're just pushing down for various reasons.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, connection, feeling safe, and as a result of those two things, having the ability to express what we need to express.
Mm-hmm.
I heard an expression that someone mentioned that is Paul Chek's expression, and I think it is the diseases of repression. This idea that people are not expressing themselves in whatever shape or form that is. You know, depression can be a lack of expression.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's journaling, dancing, or going to the gym, or singing, or sculpting, or drawing art, whatever it is, some form of expression is fundamental to the human spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And there's research you can go and find on PubMed on this kind of topics. I think it is a really key part, especially in like the chronically ill. If you've got someone who's almost bedridden with Lyme disease, CFS, whatever, like these become almost the first conversations to be having, because they may have biological, physical suffering, but that can be differentiated with, I guess, a lot of practice from the spiritual side of things. I've got a paper I'm reading at the moment about spiritual practice in integrative medicine. And it's this idea that as an integrative practitioner, part of our role is to make our patient whole spiritually, even if there isn't a cure to their biological disease. And that is huge, because when I'm working with individuals who are chronically suffering, I think that's such a key part of it. Again, it's almost like the self-acceptance piece in some ways. It's kind of saying, let's get you whole spiritually. What is needed? What do you need to let go of? What can you do? Can you draw? Can you sculpt? What is it that we can do to give you some of the fundamental human needs?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the kind of thing that I'm munching over at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the power of the mind is immense, and that's where there is something to be said about that. Like what kind of came up in my head while you were saying that, you know, I think of like you know, mold toxicity, which is kind of my big thing, and I'm trying to crack that code just like a number of people out there. And you know, so it's like, oh well, you know, what phase 2 detox pathways are involved with, you know, clearing out these mycotoxins that get stuck, you know, and sequestered. And the HLA type that, you know, can't form antibodies against it. And it's like, oh, if you can't form antibodies against it, like how the hell do we get it out? Like these things are literally, you know, these ionospheric, fat soluble and water soluble you know, molecules that get stuck in our cell membranes and are highly toxic and, you know, are highly carcinogenic. You know, they're just straight poison. Very fascinating mycotoxins. But you know, with that, you know, and then I think of again like Joe Dispenza, who I don't even really actually know. Like the Joe Dispenza who I keep referring to over and over. I'm very fascinated by his work, but like not a fanboy. I actually don't know that much about the guy or his work. I'm tapping into one of his books. But I think he was the guy that like healed his spine through meditation, or I think that's him.
Yeah, that's him.
And so, you know, I think about that a little bit. And like you're saying, the chronically ill and, you know, they might be bedridden. I think of my ex-fiance who got me kind of steered onto this path. I am very convinced to this day that, it was mold illness that wrecked her. I just didn't know what I was looking at the time. I just was seeing my at the time fiance in crippling pain, you know, with doctors like, don't know what's wrong with you sort of thing. That's how I got to where I am basically. And so I think about like, you know, kind of that meditation aspect of, you know, how much control do we have over our biology? And I almost envision like, you know, if I had the ability to, you know, reach into those cell membranes and, you know, pick out these mycotoxins that are stuck there. And I believe in the power of what that might be able to do if we have that visual cleansing. And then scientifically, what happens? Like, do we see an upregulation of different detox mechanisms? Because I think it's funny how like we've got the Krebs cycle mapped out, electron, oxidative phosphorylation and electron transport chain. You open any textbook, we've got that shit mapped out. And yet all the while our understanding of our own energy and how we can control the flow of energy. I love what you said earlier about, vibrant health is when we are, allowing energy to move, through us, out of us, whatever, unrestricted. And I think I very much believe like a lot of suffering is the restriction of energy flow. And like, I'm not a Reiki practitioner, but I've had a lot of cool conversations with Reiki practitioners. And, I just describe it as like, well, the best thing I can do to help somebody heal is create a safe space that they are able to heal, which really means, we got to start breaking down those walls that are restricting the flow of energy, because that energy gets, kind of stored up and it can become toxic and, septic. And it's like the river of life. If the river gets blocked and then there's not a clean flow of water, there's stagnation and, nasty swamps or whatever start, mosquitoes and disease and toxicity, nasty stuff. Like, we've got to let that energy flow. And something, you kind of alluded to it. We don't express it, and depression. I love what you said about depression and expression, or a lack of expression. Because you look at like animals in the wild or something, when a gorilla gets really mad, he might flip over a rock, but he's releasing that energy. Now, I'm not saying humans should, if you're mad, go flip a car over, but like, I do think, humans have gotten really good at repressing energy rather than expressing energy in a healthy way.
100%. Do you know the work of Peter Levine, Waking the Tiger, his book? So he's all about this. It's basically all around how, if you look at animals in nature when they have had a traumatic experience, so the lions hunted them down, for example, if they survive, what they do is they shake.
Yeah.
There is a default kind of response to expel that energy that has been released, as it were. And in a really, really simplistic terms, we don't do that anymore. We freeze, maybe, but we don't have that kind of default mechanism at our disposal for various reasons, depending on the trauma and things like this. So he talks a lot about kind of trauma release work. Mm-hmm. And, cases that I've read so far in his book are like taking people back to that experience, but almost like giving them the resources required to then release that energy that got trapped during that traumatic event. And I might have got that a little bit wrong, but that's the general mm-hmm. premise of some of his work. And it's a really brilliant read. And if you work, or if anyone listening deals or is suffering with kind of trauma, Peter Levine and his work is just, it's fantastic.
And that was Awakening the Tiger.
Awakening the Tiger. Because obviously, and it goes partly back to, I think he mentions in the book, sort of the polyvagal theory, this, mm-hmm. which essentially again comes back to safety. Mm-hmm. So if you are, I don't know, an animal that a lion might kill, you will go limp, you'll pretend death ultimately, in the chance that if he starts dragging you back to his den and drops you at one point, that you then may be able to run away. Mm-hmm. But once you have, you will be shaking as you munch back on that grass. Mm-hmm. There is just a natural response to help them overcome the trauma that we don't have as humans. Mm-hmm. So there is all sorts of different work. I think, is it Soho? It's something like Soho, SOHO. But basically there's like this meditation sort of retreats, I think somewhere in India, and they have these movement sort of meditations that are often 5 parts. And to do it full, I think each part is like 15 minutes long. And it varies from shaking the body in a non-rhythmic way, mm-hmm. to literally start to dispel some of the energy. There's jumping up and down on the spot with your arms above your head for 15 minutes. I think one is kind of like just sheer like screaming and shouting and things, like really releasing it. There's, I think, one other one, and the final one is just lying down for 15 minutes and grounding yourself. And we did like a mini version of that, or some of it, on the Sunday, the day after the psychedelic ceremony. I mean, we did the shaking followed by the grounding. And even that felt so like powerful and almost cleansing. And the key is that non-rhythmic element to it. You're not creating a rhythm in the shaking. It's very sort of spontaneous. And I think stuff like that, it's basic, but I think for some it can be quite powerful. And I definitely felt really just connected and grounded after doing it. I think we did 10 minutes of shaking. So yeah, going back to what you said, it's huge. You know, we're kind of, for whatever reason, I guess part of our biochemical evolution, we've lost this innate ability to deal with that trauma. And on top of that, we have different traumas these days, you know, the more emotional psyche type traumas that we can experience as well. But I do think the same tools could potentially be helpful there to some degree. So yeah, his work is fascinating though.
Yeah, and it's, you know, I like what you said, you know, the non-rhythmic, right? On the one hand, you know, I love how with science, and this is what's really cool, is I feel like we're starting to scientifically explore concepts that have always been deep rooted in our kind of, you know, species value system. And really just what we find is, oh yeah, you know, the things that we've always felt, like traditionally felt good, before we kind of grew into what we know as like modern society of skyscrapers and internet, you know. But if we more kind of look a little bit further back and just our more kind of primordial, kind of primal roots, nature, it always, you know, comes back to nature, the natural world, and the natural balance of things. And the further we've gotten away from that, the you know, kind of worse everything seems to get in some ways. That's a little cynical sounding, but you know, the non-rhythmic, it makes me think of like, on the one hand, in nature you see so much rhythm, so much beauty, and you know, you picture this beautiful uninterrupted flow of energy. But you know what also happens though is, you know, that wave that's like, and
Right.
you know, smashing against the rocks. Nature is also very, very rough and very savage and very, you know, abrasive, and you know what I mean? So there's the time that the ocean is just perfectly glass still and smooth and everything is peaceful and calm. But there's also the big storm and all of that. So that's kind of the beauty of the dynamic human experience is, you know, there is that time of kind of coherence and peace and soothing, but there's also the jarring. So I like that, of kind of the non-rhythmic dancing and how cleansing that probably is, because it's not always going to be like this perfectly smooth, eloquent, forecasted routine. Sometimes it's just sporadic shaking and whatnot that helps us release that energy that otherwise can, you know, become stagnant. And it, you know, seems like stagnant energy is kind of where disease begins in a lot of ways, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of a conversation I heard between Zach Bush and Rich Roll on the Rich Roll podcast. And he gave this amazing kind of description of kind of the cancer cell and kind of connecting it with really, I guess, the disconnection we have as a society with nature, with community, and is at a cellular level, is cancer kind of the manifestation of that lack of interconnectedness, that isolation, that breakaway from synergy and communication with the neighboring cells, i.e. our neighbors, etc. Yeah. And he did it in such a beautiful way. And the other thing, which goes back way in our conversation, but I'm going to bring it up now randomly, is going back to what we were discussing around like identity, ego, behavioral change. Zach Bush made just such a great point around our behavior is going to be partly influenced by the identity we have for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if you identify yourself as an achiever, what do you need to maintain your identity? Well, you need to find stuff to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when you don't or can't have stuff to achieve? Well, then suddenly you've got a loss of your identity, and that's going to be really stressful.
Mm-hmm.
If you identify as a helper or a fixer, what do you need? You need broken stuff. So what are you subconsciously attracting into your life? Stuff to fix. And I just thought that was such a powerful conversation and concept. And it's amazing how many times I brought that up in clinic and clients suddenly go, oh,
yeah.
You know, I have a client at the moment, relatively basic case of SIBO. Treated it with antibiotics and the SIBO diet, came back 3 months later. He comes to see me. He did all of that previously. Comes to see me with SIBO again. And, you know, we could have probably said, okay, we'll do another round of antibiotics and go back on the diet. It worked. But he has loads of stress at work. He's writing a novel at the weekends. He exercises to a very high intensity early in the morning. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, wow, yeah, I'm an achiever. Like I'm trying to achieve too much. How can I possibly heal my body if I have this much stuff going on? Right. So actually it becomes an identity issue, not a SIBO issue.
Right.
And I think that's where our conversations need to be going more when we're dealing with some of these common conditions that even SIBO can have a behavioral element, because our behavior is going to influence the nervous system. And if we're stressed, it's influencing motility and the immunity, and it's all connected. And you just have to keep going back. And I don't know, at the moment, I'm finding that I just keep going back to these sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. I'm really glad, and we'll probably wrap up on that note, because I'm really glad we brought that up with the identity piece, because I think that is kind of the fundamental core of all of it. Like, yeah, you know, SIBO can be pretty easily treated with antimicrobials and low FODMAP diet or whatever, or, Borrelia can be killed, things can be detoxed. But nonetheless, and don't get me wrong, that's very powerful, and thank God for kind of the functional medicine paradigm saving the world and whatever. But yeah, if we don't change the environment and the behavior that led to the condition, yeah, they're going to keep showing up. It's again, just like using mold as an example. Like, cool. If you never get out of the moldy environment, yeah, we're never really going to get anywhere. If we don't change the environment, we don't change the behavior. Well, then it's still just it's root cause allopathic medicine, and it's still very allopathic. It's still very reductionistic. If we ever want to get ahead of that, and so I like what you said of whatever we identify as. What's that story that we're telling ourselves of? Brendan Vermeyer is X, Y, Z. Well, I'm the holistic savage, and whatever identity that I choose to associate myself with, and then in doing so, we're putting off a specific frequency that attracts another type. Your vibe attracts your tribe, sort of thing. You put out. So yeah, I think we do have to be really questioning our self-chosen and self-allotted perception of our identity, and if you want to change the story of your life, you need to change the story you're telling yourself,
Yeah, 100%.
Damn.
And that's tough, but it's where true transformation, I guess, can start to take place.
True transformation, true healing.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a meeting in about 15 minutes, but I feel like this is probably going to become like a recurring thing of like, Alex and Brendan go down the rabbit hole round 10, But man, I've got to say, like our first podcast on your show was like hands down one of the best conversations I've had all year. And I've had some pretty amazing conversations this year. So this was pretty amazing to be able to just have round two. And I love how we just kind of dove right in, and I had no idea where it was going to go. But I think we covered a lot of ground that honestly, really valuable stuff.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
so. It's been fun.
We'll see. People are going to listen, and it'll resonate with whoever it resonates with. But either way, amazing conversation. You're such a wealth of knowledge and experience and wisdom, and so many dynamic, bits of knowledge all fused together. And yeah, I mean, I think that's how we're really going to create the necessary change and raise the awareness so people really can. Because the whole point, for me at least, is kind of this whole, teaching people how to heal themselves, how to obtain that life that they want. And so we've got to, if we want to see a different result in the world, we've got to change the conversation. I feel like our conversation was pretty radical. So it was good. And so with that said, thank you so much for joining me, man.
Thank you for having me on. I'm honored, and it has been a lot of fun, and I hope your listeners have enjoyed it.
Absolutely. So I'll keep you posted on when we drop the episode. Probably our ticket list or whatever, like 8 weeks or so, is the ETA. And now I've got to figure out how this recorded. Part of it recorded to my computer and part of it recorded to the cloud. But fortunately, I have helpful tech people. But I'll let you get back to your day. I'm sure we'll talk soon, my friend. But amazing conversation, and I'm sure it'll happen eventually where our paths cross. So next time you hop to this side of the world or vice versa, we'll have to have a live convo.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to the day.
Yep. Cool, man. We'll talk soon, my friend.
All right. Take care, Brendan.
See you, Alex.
Bye.